The old waiter's memory. I was a young man when I worked at the restaurant. It was a small place, but always full of people. I wore a white shirt and a black apron. My job was to serve food and clean tables. Every day was the same. I took orders, brought drinks, and smiled at customers. Some were kind, some were rude. But I didn't mind. I needed the job. I needed the money. One evening the restaurant was very busy. People were laughing and talking. The sound of plates and glasses filled the air. I was carrying a tray when I heard a familiar laugh. I stopped. My heart beat faster. That laugh. I knew it. It was soft, warm, and full of joy. Slowly, I turned my head. And then I saw her. She was sitting at a table near the window. She looked happy. She was laughing with a man. He was holding her hand. They were smiling at each other. For a moment, time stopped. I just stood there, holding my tray. Memories came back, one after another. Memories of her, memories of us. But she didn't see me. She didn't look my way. She was lost in her new world, and I was just a waiter. I took a deep breath and walked away. My hands were shaking, but I kept working. The past was gone. I told myself it didn't matter, but deep inside I knew it did. I still remember the first time I saw her. It was a rainy afternoon. I was sitting in the library, reading a book. The rain hit the windows softly, making a quiet rhythm. She walked in, shaking the raindrops from her coat. Her hair was wet, and she looked cold. She sat at the table next to mine. She opened a book, but didn't start reading. Instead, she looked out the window, watching the raindrops slide down the glass. Her eyes looked distant, as if she was lost in thought. I wanted to talk to her, but I was too shy. For weeks I saw her again and again. She always came to the library at the same time. She always sat at the same table. Sometimes she brought a cup of tea, and the smell of mint filled the air. Other times she wrote in a small notebook, her fingers moving quickly across the pages. One day I finally found the courage to speak. "Do you like the rain?" I asked, my voice shaking a little. She turned to me and smiled. It was a soft, kind smile. "Yes," she said. "It makes everything feel quiet." That was the beginning. We started talking every day. At first, our conversations were short. We talked about books, the weather, and our favourite tea. But soon we shared more. She told me she loved poetry. I told her I loved history. She laughed at my bad jokes, and I loved her laughter. We spent hours together. We sat by the library window, watching the world outside. We walked through the park, stepping on fallen leaves. We sat by the river, watching the water move. She made me feel special. She made me believe in love. I thought she would always be by my side. But life doesn't always go the way we want. One day, she stopped coming to the library. I waited for her, but she never arrived. I called her, but she didn't answer. I wrote her letters, but she never replied. I didn't understand why. Days turned into weeks, and I still hoped to see her again. Now, years later, I finally saw her. She was sitting at a table in the restaurant, laughing with someone else. She looked happy. She had moved on. And I was just a waiter, watching from afar, holding a tray in my hands. I stood there, frozen. The tray in my hands felt heavy. My heart beat fast, but my feet would not move. I just stared at her, at the way she laughed, the way her eyes sparkled. She had not changed much. Her hair was a little shorter, and she wore a different style, but she was still the same girl I once loved. She looked so happy. The man sitting across from her smiled at her like she was his whole world. He held her hand on the table, his fingers gently touching hers. They looked perfect together. I felt something deep inside me, something heavy, something painful. I wanted to turn away, but my body did not listen. My mind was full of memories. I remembered the way we used to sit together, the way we talked for hours, the way she once held my hand. I remembered the promises we made, the dreams we shared. I thought we would be together forever. But forever does not always mean forever. Someone called my name. I blinked and looked away. I had a job to do. I forced my feet to move and walked to another table. I smiled at the customers and took their orders. But inside, my heart was breaking. As I walked past her table, I heard her laugh again. That sound used to be my favourite. Now it felt like a knife in my chest. I wanted to talk to her, to ask her why she disappeared, why she left without a word. But what would it change? She had moved on. She was happy. And I was just a waiter, serving food, watching her from a distance. I told myself to forget. I told myself it was the past, but the past does not disappear so easily. The night passed slowly. I tried to focus on my work, but my mind was somewhere else. Every time I passed her table, I felt a sharp pain in my chest. She looked so happy. She laughed, she talked, she held his hand. It was clear she had forgotten me. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run away from this moment, but I had a job to do. So I kept walking, kept smiling, kept pretending that everything was fine. The restaurant was full, and the noise of people talking and laughing filled the air. But all I could hear was her voice. Then something unexpected happened. She turned her head and looked in my direction. For a second, our eyes met. My breath caught in my throat. Did she recognize me? Did she remember? She blinked, tilting her head slightly. Then a small frown appeared on her face, as if she was trying to place me in her memory. My heart pounded. Was she going to say something? But just as quickly as it happened, she looked away. She turned back to the man sitting across from her and smiled. It was as if I was a stranger to her, just another waiter in a busy restaurant. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced myself to keep moving. The past was gone. She had moved on, and I needed to do the same. But how do you forget someone who was once your whole world? The night finally ended, the restaurant emptied, and I cleaned the last few tables. As I wiped the surface, I glanced at the table where she had sat. Their plates were empty. Their glasses were half full, but something caught my eye. Something small, something familiar. A silver bracelet. My hands trembled as I picked it up. I knew this bracelet. I had given it to her years ago. It had her name engraved on the inside. My fingers ran over the letters. memories flooding back. She had worn it every day. She had once told me that she would never take it off, and yet here it was, left behind, forgotten. Did she leave it on purpose? Did she remember me, even for a second? Or was it just a coincidence? I stared at the bracelet, feeling the weight of the past pressing down on me. Maybe some things are meant to be left behind. I stood there, holding the silver bracelet in my hand. My heart was heavy, my mind full of questions. Did she forget it by accident, or was this her way of saying goodbye, one final time? I closed my eyes and let the memories take over. I remembered the day I gave her this bracelet. It was her birthday, and I had saved money for months to buy it. When she saw it, her eyes filled with tears. She had hugged me and whispered, "I will wear it forever, forever." The word echoed in my mind as I looked at the empty restaurant. The tables were clean, the chairs pushed in, and the lights dimmed. Everyone had left, except me. I slowly walked to the back, where my small locker was. I placed the bracelet inside, next to my old notebook, a notebook full of letters I had once written to her but never sent. I took a deep breath and grabbed my coat. It was time to go home. As I stepped outside, the cold air hit my face. The streets were quiet, the sky dark. Only a few street lights flickered, casting long shadows on the sidewalk. As I walked, I thought about her, about us, about the promises we made and the future we never had. She had moved on, built a new life. And me? I was still stuck in the past, waiting for a moment that would never come. I reached my small apartment and sat by the window. The city lights twinkled in the distance, but I felt nothing. I pulled the bracelet from my pocket and turned it over in my fingers. Should I return it to her, or should I keep it as a memory? My thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. My heart jumped. No one ever visited me. Who could it be at this hour? I hesitated before opening the door. When I did, I felt my breath catch in my throat. She was standing there, the same woman who had once been my whole world. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment we just stared at each other. The past, the pain, the memories, all of it was there, hanging in the silence between us. Then she spoke. Her voice was soft, almost uncertain. "I think I forgot something," she said. I swallowed hard, gripping the bracelet in my hand. "Yes," I whispered. "You did." And for the first time in years, I didn't know what would happen next. She stood in the doorway, her hands clasped together. I could see the hesitation in her eyes. The same eyes I once knew so well, the same eyes that had once looked at me with love. Now they were filled with something else, uncertainty, maybe regret. I stepped back, allowing her inside. She walked slowly, looking around my small apartment. It wasn't much, just a table, a chair, and a bed in the corner. The walls were bare, except for a small shelf with a few old books. She turned to me. "You kept it," she said softly. I looked down at the silver bracelet in my hand. "Yes," I replied. "I did." Silence filled the room, the kind of silence that held 1,000 unspoken words. Finally, she took a deep breath. "I didn't know if I should come," she admitted. "But when I saw you tonight, I felt something. Memories, I guess." I nodded, understanding. I felt them too. She sat down at the table, her fingers tracing the wood. "Do you ever think about the past?" she asked. I sighed. "Every day." She looked up at me, her expression unreadable. "I made mistakes," she whispered. "I hurt you." I sat across from her, placing the bracelet on the table between us. "We both made mistakes," I said. "But that was a long time ago." She nodded slowly. "I thought I was happy," she admitted, "but sometimes I wonder, what if? What if?" The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. I swallowed hard. "You have a life now," I said gently. "And I have, well, I have my memories." She looked down, biting her lip. "Do you still hate me?" I shook my head. "No," I said honestly. "I could never hate you." She exhaled, a small, sad smile forming on her lips. "I should go," she said, standing up. I walked her to the door. For a moment we stood there, just looking at each other. Then she reached out and took my hand, squeezing it lightly. "Take care of yourself," she whispered. "You too," I replied. And then she was gone. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty doorway. The past had come knocking tonight, and now it had left again. I looked down at the bracelet in my hand. For years I had held on to it, believing it meant something. But now I realized it was just a piece of silver, a memory I no longer needed to carry. With a deep breath, I walked to the window. The city stretched out before me, full of lights, full of life. A new day would come, and this time I was ready to let go.